Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Aaron, I'm going very well today. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. We have had a couple of days together this week in Adelaide, and we didn't organise this, so that wasn't very good of us. But anyway, here we are looking at another topic as part of our ongoing Feeling Smarter suite of, I guess, technical discussions about various topics that are related to self-managed super funds.
Yeah, that's right. And look, just for something a little bit different, we thought that this week that maybe I would pose the leading questions and get you to sort of chime in with your thought processes on the matter. And so to lead off, I guess one of the things that we do with regards to the document service that we provide is we obviously do a lot of fund establishments for firms out there, and one of the questions that we get asked a lot is around the execution of those documents, and whether or not those documents can be executed electronically or whether they need to have a wet signature. So perhaps you can start the conversation from that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting with SMSFs because it's kind of one of the very last areas to get resolved under the technology neutrality laws. And by that, we've had measures that we worked through during COVID in a temporary sense, and then we saw those temporary measures become permanent measures when we think about the execution of deeds and so forth under Section 127(1) of the Corporations Act. The problem that exists, though, is that the SIS Act and regs are basically exempted from the Electronic Transactions Act. So what that means is that in some parts of the different laws, and the tax laws are certainly relevant, and in more recent times, we saw the finalisation and ultimately opening up of the ability to sign in either wet ink or electronically on all aspects of the Corporations Act.
Yep.
But there are numerous documents that when we go through the fund setup that are actually set out and required to be signed under the SIS Act. And a perfect example of that is the ATO trustee declaration.
Yep.
So that must be executed by the trustee within 21 days of their appointment of being a trustee or director. But there is no ability to actually sign that in an electronic means. So we have these differences that currently exist between things like deeds. Well, yes, you can sign it because the Corporations Act allows for that technology neutral approach. And then we have the various SIS requirements. And if we think about a corporate trustee for a minute, then you have two different consents to act. So you have a consent to act under the Corporations Act, but then you have a consent to act under Section 118 as well. So one of those you can sign electronically and the other one you can't. So this is the problem that exists right now, that you have these differences in understanding what can be signed electronically and what can't. And until we get that finalized, then the default option in many instances and in reality will be that we have to go down that path of wet ink.
Right, and so excluding, say, the trustee declaration for a moment. I mean, obviously, it's not a document that you can exclude because you have to sign one. But so what I'm hearing then is that again, in the old argument of individual versus corporate trustees, then clearly there is already a greater scope to sign more documentation electronically from a corporate trustee point of view than with individuals.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely right. There is naturally different state jurisdictions that you need to look at and understand whether those documents can be signed in both physical form and then also in an electronic means. But the bigger challenge than the overlay is then the witnessing requirements that sit with individual trustees. And therefore, you're not only looking at execution, but you're looking at the relevant witnessing rules in those different states as well. The other interesting fact when it comes to fund establishments, though, is I've talked about Corporations Act, I've talked about SIS Act, but there are other aspects to the establishment process that are not governed by what the legislation or regulations are saying, but are rather governed by what the deed says.
Yep.
Right. So if we think about an application for membership, well, Section 17A of SIS says, well, you've got a limitation of up to 6 members. but the process for appointing the member actually sits within the governing rules.
Yep.
So we also have to overlay, well, what does the deed say about those sort of documents being able to use an electronic means as well? And therefore, can you actually get those documents signed either in an electronic form or wet ink requirement? And again, it goes back to what in the context of that needs to be written or executed, and then what it means within the deed that says, well, yeah, I can or no, I can't. And that was one of the things we very deliberately did at the 30th of June when we rolled out the updated version of our deed. Is we've really followed very closely these technology neutrality laws and adopted this universal model that sits within Section 110 of the Corporations Act, noting, having been involved in the Treasury discussions, that this is the approach that is likely to then unfold when we hopefully, finally, in the not too distant future, see some resolution about that within the SIS Act as well.
Yeah, okay. So look, and I guess really to wrap it up, then for us moving forward, that not only do we look at the establishment stage, but then there's the ongoing administration. So items such as pension commencements, and what I hear from you there is that that deed obviously has a fair bit to play in that space, because there's nothing that dictates how the documentation needs to be signed from a SIS point at this point in time, but that we want to finally at some point see some consistency across the industry with the way that we sign documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ultimately then you are starting to really need to understand what documents are dictated by your deed, and then what documents are dictated by what the legislation requires. And once you get across that, then you can start to work out how you want to ultimately look at getting documents signed. And again, that's one of the reasons why we made that shift to start to include that, because things like pension documents are more and more likely to go out to clients to get executed in some sort of electronic way. So the ability to do that is then quite clear within the Smarter SMSF deed to allow them to, and which is why we're saying to people as well that, yeah, we might see substantial changes over the journey, like the reforms we saw in 07 and 17 and the like, but there are also other big ticket items that come along throughout this journey. Yes, Hill and Zooters and that sort of thing, the relevant case law, but this digital signing piece is actually quite significant as well. So if you want to take advantage of it, you want to make sure that there are powers in the deed to be able to handle those things as well.
Excellent. Well, I guess considering it's a core service of ours is the documentation. So I look forward to us speaking a little bit more about this sort of in the coming weeks, months, years.
Well, I hope it gets resolved within years, but yeah, absolutely in the coming months. I guess, I think 2024, if I stay, I guess, half glass full, I'd like to get some closure on it. And we're not having to worry about the nuances that sit there. We can quite comfortably move forward in what is a technology neutral sense.
Terrific. Sounds good, Aaron.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. Cheers.
All right. See you, mate.